Section 2 of Letters of Ulysses S. Grant to his father and his youngest sister, 1857 78. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Jim Clevenger. Letters of Ulysses S. Grant to his father and his youngest sister, 1857 78, by Ulysses S. Grant, Section 2. In March 1861, Lincoln was inaugurated President. The Confederates proclaimed themselves aliens. South Carolina seceded. Other Southern states followed. Fort Sumter was fired upon, and President Lincoln issued his first call for troops, 75,000 volunteers. The quota for Illinois had been fixed at 6 regiments. Galena immediately raised a company. Grant declined the captaincy, but promised his aid in every way possible. Galena, April 21st, 1861. Dear Father: we are now in the midst of trying times, when every one must be for or against his country, and show his colors too by his every act. Having been educated for such an emergency at the expense of the government, I feel that it has upon me superior claims, such claims as no ordinary motive of self-interest can surmount. I do not wish to act hastily or unadvisedly in the matter, and as there are more than enough to respond to the first call of the President, I have not yet offered myself. I have promised, and am giving all the assistance I can in organizing the company whose services have been accepted from this place. I have promised further to go with them to the State Capitol, and if I can be of service to the Governor in organizing his State troops, to do so. What I ask now is your approval of the course I am taking, or advice in the matter. A letter written this week will reach me in Springfield. I have not time to write to you but a hasty line, for though Sunday as it is, we are all busy here. In a few minutes I shall be engaged in directing tailors in the style and trim of uniform for our men. Whatever may have been my political opinions before, I have but one sentiment now. That is, we have a government, and laws, and a flag, and they must all be sustained. There are but two parties now, traitors and patriots, and I want hereafter to be ranked with the latter, and I trust the stronger party. I do not know, but you may be placed in an awkward position and a dangerous one, pecuniarily, but cost cannot now be counted. My advice would be to leave where you are if you are not safe with the views you entertain. I would never stultify my opinion for the sake of a little security. I will say nothing about our business. Orville and Lank will keep you posted as to that. Write soon and direct as above. Yours truly, U.S. Grant. To his sister Mary. Grant organized and drilled the Galena company, then went with it to Springfield, the State capital, and mustered it into the State service. Governor Yates then requested him to remain and assist in the Adjutant General's office, because he realized the value of Grant's former military experience. Shortly after this, the legislature authorized the State to accept the services of 10 additional regiments. Governor Yates requested Grant to muster these new troops into the service. The Aunt Rachel mentioned was a sister of Jesse R. Grant, who lived in Virginia. She had a large plantation and owned many slaves, and was naturally an ardent secessionist. A heated partisan correspondence was carried on during this time between the aunt and the niece, Clara, Grant's oldest sister. In the letter referred to, the aunt writes, "If you are with the accursed Lincolnites, the ties of consanguinity shall be forever severed." Springfield, April 29th, 1861. DEAR SISTER: I came to this place several days ago, fully expecting to find a letter here for me from Father. As yet I have received none. It was my intention to have returned to Galena last evening, but the governor detained me, and I presume will want me to remain with him until all the troops are called into service, or those to be so called are fully mustered in and completely organized. The enthusiasm throughout this State surpasses anything that could have been imagined 3 weeks ago. Only 6 regiments are called for here, while at least 30 could be promptly raised. The governor and all others in authority are harassed from morning until night with patriotic men and such political influence as they can bring, to obtain first promises of acceptance of their companies, if there should be another call for troops. The eagerness to enter companies that were accepted by the governor was so great that it has been impossible for commanders of companies to keep their numbers within the limits of the law. Consequently, companies that have arrived here have all had from 10 to 60 men more than can be accepted. The legislature on Saturday last passed a bill providing for the maintenance and discipline of these surplus troops for 1 month, unless sooner mustered into service of the United States under a second call. I am convinced that if the South knew the entire unanimity of the North for the Union and maintenance of law, and how freely men and money are offered to the cause, they would lay down their arms at once in humble submission. There is no disposition to compromise now. Nearly every one is anxious to see the government fully tested as to its strength, and see if it is not worth preserving. The conduct of Eastern Virginia has been so abominable through the whole contest, that there would be a great deal of disappointment here if matters should be settled before she is thoroughly punished. This is my feeling, and I believe it universal. Great allowance should be made for South Carolinians, for the last generation have been educated from their infancy to look upon their government as oppressive and tyrannical, and only to be endured till such time as they might have sufficient strength to strike it down. Virginia and other border States have no such excuse, and are therefore traitors at heart as well as in act. I should like very much to see the letter Aunt Rachel wrote Clara, or a copy of it. Can you send it? When I left Galena, Julia and the children were very well. Jessie had been very sick for a few days, but was getting much better. I have been very anxious that you should spend the summer with us. You have never visited us, and I don't see why you can't. 2 of you often travel together, and you might do so again, and come out with Clara. I do not like to urge anything of the kind, lest you should think that I ignored entirely the question of economy, but I do not do so. The fact is, I have had my doubts whether or not it would not be more prudent for all of you to lock up and leave, until the present excitement subsides. If Father were younger and Simpson strong and healthy, I would not advise such a course. On the contrary, I would like to see every Union man in the border slave States remain firm at his post. Every such man is equal to an armed volunteer at this time in defense of his country. There is very little that I can tell you that you do not get from the papers. Remember me to all at home, and write to me at once to this place. Brother Ulysses. Grant is now assisting in the Adjutant General's office as requested by Governor Yates. In connection with the call for troops and the enthusiastic response, he says elsewhere, there was not a State in the North of 1,000,000 inhabitants that would not have furnished the entire number faster than arms would have been supplied to them if it had been necessary. General Headquarters, State of Illinois, Adjutant General's Office, Springfield, May 2nd, 1861. Dear Father, your letter of the 24th instant was received the same evening one I had written to Mary was mailed. I would have answered earlier, but for the fact I had just written. I am not a volunteer, and indeed could not be, now that I did not go into the first company raised in Galena. The call of the President was so promptly responded to that only those companies that organized at once and telegraphed their application to come in were received. All other applications were filed, and there are enough of them to furnish Illinois quota if the army should be raised to 300,000 men. I am serving on the Governor's staff at present, at his request, but suppose I shall not be here long. I should have offered myself for the colonelcy of one of the regiments, but I find all those places are wanted by politicians who are up to log rolling, and I do not care to be under such persons. The war feeling is not abating here much, although hostilities appear more remote than they did a few days ago. 3 of the 6 regiments mustered in from this State are now at Cairo, and probably will be reinforced with 2 others within a few days. Galena has several more companies organized, but only one of them will be able to come in under a new call for 10 regiments. Chicago has raised companies enough nearly to fill all the first call. The Northern feeling is so fully aroused that they will stop at no expense of money and men to ensure the success of their cause. I presume the feeling is just as strong on the other side, but they are infinitely in the minority in resources. I have not heard from Galena since coming down here, but presume all is moving along smoothly. My advice is not to urge collections from such men as we knew to be good, and to make no efforts to sell in the present distracted state of our currency. The money will not buy Eastern exchange, and is liable to become worse. I think that 30 days from this we shall have specie, and the bills of good foreign banks to do business on, and then will be the time to collect. If Mary writes to me any time next week, she may direct here to Ulysses. E. B. Washburn was member of Congress representing Galena. Pillow was a Confederate general. He had served in the Mexican War, where Grant had learned to know him. Grant expresses in this letter the opinion that the war will be of short duration. Many believed with him that the war would be over in 30 days. He continued to think this until the battle of Shiloh. He believed that there would have been no more battles in the West after the capture of Fort Donelson, if all the troops in that region had been under a single commander who would have followed up that victory. Camp Yates, near Springfield, May 6, 1861. Dear Father, your second letter, dated the 1st of May, has just come to hand. I commenced writing you a letter 3 or 4 days ago, but was interrupted so often that I did not finish it. I wrote one to Mary, which no doubt was duly received, but do not remember whether it answers your questions or not. At the time our first Galena company was raised, I did not feel at liberty to engage in hot haste, but took an active interest in drilling them and imparting all the instructions I could, and at the request of the members of the company and of Mr. Washburn, I came here for the purpose of assisting for a short time in camp, and of offering, if necessary, my services for the war. The next 2 days after my arrival it was rainy and muddy, so that the troops could not drill, and I concluded to go home. Governor Yates heard it and requested me to remain. Since that I have been acting in that capacity, and for the last few days have been in command of this camp. The last of the 6 regiments called for from this State will probably leave by tomorrow or the day following, and then I shall be relieved from this command. The legislature of this State provided for the raising of 11 additional regiments and a battalion of artillery. A portion of these the Governor will appoint me to muster into the service of the State, when, I presume, my services may end. I might have obtained the colonelcy of a regiment possibly, but I was perfectly sickened at the political wire pulling for all these commissions, and would not engage in it. I shall be in no ways backward in offering my services when and where they are required, but I feel that I have done more now than I could do serving as a captain under a green colonel, and if this thing continues they will want more men at a later date. There have been fully 30,000 more volunteers who have offered their services than can be accepted under the present call, without including the call made by the State. But I can go back to Galena and drill the 3 or 4 companies there, and render them efficient for any future call. My own opinion is that this war will be but of short duration. The administration has acted most prudently and sagaciously so far in not bringing on a conflict before it had its forces fully marshaled. When they do strike, our thoroughly loyal States will be fully protected, and a few decisive victories in some of the Southern ports will send the secession army howling, and the leaders in rebellion will flee the country. All the States will then be loyal for a generation to come. Negroes will depreciate so rapidly in value that nobody will want to own them, and their masters will be the loudest in their declamation against the institution from a political and economic point of view. The negro will never disturb this country again. The worst that is to be apprehended from him is now. He may revolt and cause more destruction than any Northern man, except it be the ultra abolitionist, wants to see. A Northern army may be required in the next 90 days to go south to suppress a negro insurrection. As much as the South have vilified the North, that army would go on such a mission, and with the purest motives. I have just received a letter from Julia. All are well. Julia takes a very sensible view of our present difficulties. She would be sorry to have me go, but thinks the circumstances may warrant it, and will not throw a single obstacle in the way. There is no doubt but the valiant Pillow has been planning an attack on Cairo, but as he will learn that that point is well garrisoned, and that they have their ditch on the outside filled with water, he will probably desist. As, however, he would find it necessary to receive a wound on the first discharge of firearms, he would not be a formidable enemy. I do not say he would shoot himself. Ah, no. I am not so uncharitable as many who served under him in Mexico. I think, however, he might report himself wounded on the receipt of a very slight scratch, received hastily in any way, and might irritate the sore until he convinced himself that he had been wounded by the enemy. Tell Simpson that I hope he will be able to visit us this summer. I should like very much to have him stay with us, and I want him to make my house his home. Remember me to all. Ulysses. Grant has just finished mustering into State service the 10 additional regiments authorized by the Legislature. He then returned to Galena, whence he wrote to Washington May 24, 1861, to the Adjutant General, tendering his services until the close of the war in such capacity as may be offered. He adds: I would say, in view of my present age and length of service, I feel myself competent to command a regiment, if the President in his judgment should see fit to entrust one to me. He never received an answer to this letter. Long after, it was found not properly filed. Grant's own comment is that it was probably barely read by the Adjutant General, and certainly could not have been submitted to higher authority. The day he wrote this letter he returned to Springfield to find that Governor Yates had already appointed him colonel of one of the regiments that he himself had recently mustered into the State service, the 22d Illinois Infantry. Galena, May 30th, 1861. DEAR FATHER: I have now been home nearly a week, but returned to Springfield to day. I have tendered my services to the Government, and go to day to make myself useful, if possible, from this until all our national difficulties are ended. During the 6 days I have been at home, I have felt all the time as if a duty were being neglected that was paramount to any other duty I ever owed. I have every reason to be well satisfied with myself for the services already rendered, but to stop now would not do. All here are well. Orville or Lank will write to you in a day or two and tell you how business matters stand. Write to me at Springfield. Yours truly, U.S. Grant. End of Section 2. Recording by Jim Clevenger, Little Rock, Arkansas. Jim at jocclev.com.